A lone tower perches on the cliff top, its stones weathered by wind and salt, watching over the restless tide below. The waves pull and release, carrying whispers of footsteps that left their mark long before us. The old wharf sags under the weight of forgotten ambition, and the land holds the quiet memory of choices that uplifted some while leaving others in the shadows. Moss creeps along the stone walls where hands once gripped and laboured, and the wind threads through the hollowed trees, carrying voices that were never meant to be heard. Between the rustle of leaves and the shimmer of water, you sense the tension of power, the cost of taking more than one can ever truly return, and the stories that linger when no one chose to listen. Every corner, every path seems to hold a question. What is left behind when ambition shapes the world, and whose lives are buried beneath its weight? Welcome to If These Trees Could Talk.
We acknowledge that we are recording this episode on the land of the Wonnarua people, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We also acknowledge the Yuin people, the traditional custodians of the lands and waters discussed in this episode. We honour their enduring connection to this country, and we share our gratitude for their commitment to upholding the truth of this land. We further acknowledge the South Sea Islanders who were forcibly brought to these lands, often exploited and silenced, and whose experiences are an important part of this history. We honour the resilience of the Indigenous communities whose voices are often absent from the stories we inherit, and wish to acknowledge the impact of these colonial injustices. May this episode reflect a commitment to truth-telling, listening to silenced voices, and understanding the true history of our country.
There's stories of these people turning up on a beach and just taking a whole heap of young men and putting them on this ship, and their families never knowing what actually happened to them.
How did the world let that happen?
They care about greed, and unfortunately, they're the people who end up in charge of the rest of us. At what point does your interest become more important than the well-being of others?
I'm just putting in this post-recording trigger warning for my mum, otherwise referred to as Deebs. There are some bad words in this episode, soz.
Hello, Shannon. Hi, Megan. We probably should address the fact that I sound like I'm dying. I'm not. I'm actually heaps better than what I was.
Dying or about to have a phone call on an adult hotline.
Well, I did think that maybe, like if people are into this voice, maybe I could start an OnlyFans. Hi, let me tell you about terrible, terrible things that happen in the world. Surely there's got to be someone into that. The things we'll do for money. Anyway, we are going back to Eden today, and there's a few things that I want to talk about. Before we do, I'll just introduce everybody to this beautiful place. As you sail towards Eden on the New South Wales south coast, it's difficult not to be awestruck by its natural beauty as the sapphire blue waves crash against the folded red rock platforms that the sea has carved into its landscape. An ocean teeming with sea life, it's a regular occurrence to see whales and their calves frolicking close to the shoreline and in the safety of the bays, or fur seals playing in the waves off rocky outcrops of the many headlands that make up this striking piece of coastline. Eden and its surrounds are a mecca for whale watchers between June and September, when humpback whales make their annual migration. However, the shores of this coastline were not always a safe haven for whales, and we have talked about that in a previous episode. I think it was number 2.
It was very early on.
Yes. It wasn't safe for whales, and it wasn't always safe for the humans that inhabited it. And now as you approach the coast, atop of those red cliffs stands a structure ambitiously erected by a man who left a legacy as murky as the whale blood-stained waters he sailed in. So we have talked about Ben Boyd a few times and mentioned it.
I feel prepared for today's session. Like I'm not going to be completely sideswiped.
Yes. So I've mentioned him a lot, and there's a couple of reasons that I'm doing this episode today. One is because of Megan's episode about Peter Warner last time, and there's a bit of a parallel with this. So it was a great time to bring this in because people already have a bit of an idea because of you talking about Atar in the last episode. But I had a really lovely message from a listener called Scott who said to me, the Ben Boyd episode isn't on the platform that he listens on. And I was like, no, we haven't published it yet, but we have talked about it heaps of times when we were talking about Eden. So that was another reason that I thought today was a really great opportunity to do that. And I want to say thanks to Scott for his really lovely message.
We love Scott's here.
We do love Scott's. We've just got another one to add to the group.
Excellent. So I'm excited to be sharing this because as we speak, I am either side of work trips to Eden.
Another reason
too. Yes. So as you did your introduction, I was like, well, I didn't sail in, but as I flew in, it was very fresh in my mind. Stunning, stunning country.
Absolutely beautiful.
Can I talk about what I saw?
You can.
I saw a real platypus. I'm so excited because you sent me a pin of where I should go. And I did. And thought, wow, what are the chances are pretty low. This isn't going to happen. And I would have been looking at the water for maybe 10 seconds. And then I saw the V and I looked up and thought, oh, is that a duck? And then I just saw this little butt go down into the water and I was like, oh my God, I got it. And I started rushing down the river so I could get a bit closer to it. And I was in my complete corporate wear with my heeled boots. I had to clean them when I got to the car because there was mud everywhere, but I just didn't care. And I just followed this platypus all the way up the river and we hung out. It was just me and this, except for the movement of the platypus, it was just glass river. It was just stunning. And I couldn't wait to call you, but the tower was down.
Yeah.
So I had to connect to some Wi-Fi and send you messages and I was so excited.
My response to Megan's messages was, who even are you?
Well, on my way back that afternoon, I also saw a lyrebird and an eagle on the side of the road. So in that one day, I was you.
Yeah.
The eagle, it wasn't in a tree or anything. I mean, I see them flying above my property a lot, but it was on the side of the road eating something. So I thought it was a kangaroo. Like that's how big it was.
So massive, aren't they?
So big.
Yeah.
And I probably wouldn't have even batted an eyelid at this lyrebird except that we talked about lyrebirds.
Yeah.
Also early on.
Yes.
From exactly the same area. So
and you had your great lyrebird experience at Eden as well.
I did. It's a magical place.
It's such a great place. And I think everybody should probably just get it on the list. We went to Eden the first time on our trip home from Tasmania and it was just an accidental thing. Like we got off the Spirit of Tassie and Scott said we'll just drive as far as we can and then try and get somewhere to stay for the night on our way home. And we ended up in Eden and it was only an overnight visit for the first time. And I'd been desperate to get back there. And then we went, it would have been not September last year, the year before, and had 3 or 4 days there. And then I got to go out and explore the national park. And actually, this Eden part has a lot to do with me wanting to start the podcast because I learnt so much about this place and I had no idea about any of it. And I wrestled with so many things. I'm obsessed with whales, like that's a given. But the historical side and the relationship of the Davidsons with the whales and the Indigenous connection to the orcas in the place, like there is so much to learn about in this one tiny spot of our country. So after coming away from there and then deep diving and doing all the research and stuff about everything, watching all the documentaries, and I was like, somebody needs to tell people about this. And anyway, here we are 12 months later telling people about random shit that we see along the road. The other part about this episode coming up today is while we say we're a travel podcast, there's a lot of social justice issues wrapped up in this and in all of our stories. And I think after Megan's episode, and I don't know whether our listeners have had the same response because it comes out tomorrow when we're recording this, but I have literally thought about your episode for 2 weeks.
I have not. That was the biggest weight off my shoulders. I have not thought about it since.
I have not been able to stop thinking about it and this question of kindness versus selfishness.
You disagree with me, don't you?
No, so I think...
Now you're not on the spot. You've got a different answer.
No, but I had to wrestle with my own values and why I felt like that. So I did some research then too, and I found out about this scientific experiment that they did where they took a heap of wallets with people's ID in them and a decent amount of money and just dropped them around the place and how the majority of them were returned.
With money.
With the money still in them.
Yeah, I've heard this.
So then I started looking for other research because I haven't read the book that Megan talked about. And the other part of it is I am surrounded by so many kind people. And I was like, why is this where I sit? And I hope that the people who listen think about, I know that I think you always rip me off about how deep I go into stuff. And I know that not everybody does that, and it's fine.
I learned so much from you. I can't imagine how dumb I would be if I didn't sit here with you every fortnight.
And I just keep arguing that I only sound smart because Megan edits me.
You don't sound smart today. You sound sexy.
Oh, I wouldn't say it's sexy. I don't think you intended that episode to be so thought-provoking, but it really was.
So of course I did.
Did you really?
Well, I had most definitely had a lot of deep thoughts. Peter Warner was my tool that I wanted to use to talk about the humankind
Kindness
book because it did have an impact on me.
Yeah.
But unlike you, I listen to other people's words and take them in and go, oh, yeah. But I'm not as good at deeply putting that in there and mixing it with all my other knowledge and opinions and then coming out with some perfectly constructed thoughts on that.
Well, today's episode is kind of my rebuttal.
Uh-oh.
I think where I ended up was that it's not that I don't think that humans are kind. I think my thought pattern is that kindness doesn't run the world and that power does. And that the people who hold that power have turned our kindness and decency into a resource that they can then use. They sell us that idea of being good citizens while keeping us scared enough to stay in line and divided enough not to notice that they're the only people winning. They don't profit from us taking care of each other. I didn't want our listeners to think that I don't think that there are kind people in the world.
Of course. That was a very good rebuttal.
I have thought about this so much, Megan. I hope other people get the same out of it as what I did. It was a very great episode and you worried so much about it, and I just want to let you know that it inspired a whole trail of thought for me. I've talked about the couple of times that we've visited Beowa National Park. For people who want to go there, because we are a social justice podcast wrapped up in a travel podcast, beautiful beaches, amazing national park. It's located on the traditional lands of the Yuin people, which we mentioned in the Acknowledgement of Country. And the park itself boasts some of the most inspiring coastal scenery on the south coast. Heaps of hikers head to the area to do the Light to Light trail, which hugs the coastline between Boyd's Tower and Green Cape Lighthouse. And Green Cape is where I've had my most amazing onshore whale experience. There were hundreds.
Did you talk about this in the old time episode?
I probably did.
I can see it happening in my head at how excited you all were.
Oh, I was insanely excited.
Yeah.
It was really, really incredible. And then the same day, we actually heard whales before we seen them, and we run to this cliff top and watch them Yeah, it was really, really amazing. So if you're going to visit this place, if you can do it like in June or September, October when the white whales are migrating. Did you see them when you?
No, not August. Don't go in August.
Okay.
It was still beautiful. Just don't go looking for whales specifically.
Yeah,
in August.
because if you go in the right times, you're going to be hard pressed not to find them. Beowa National Park was established in 1971 as Ben Boyd National Park, but in a commitment to acknowledging and respecting the Aboriginal cultural heritage of this area, Beowa National Park was renamed in 2022 in consultation with local Aboriginal custodians. The word Beowa means orca or killer whale in the local Indigenous language, recognising the Aboriginal cultural heritage of the area. The new name for the park was chosen through an extensive consultation process between national parks, more than 60 representatives of the Aboriginal and South Sea Islander community, and you will understand a bit more about the South Sea Islanders being included as we move through the story of Ben Boyd and his short 7-year stay in New South Wales. But this ties in to Attar. Those people were taken from their lands.
That's right.
Yeah. So we're going to learn a bit more about why and how that happened in here. Benjamin Boyd's early days were spent between London and Merton Hall, his family estate in Scotland. In 1842, Benjamin Boyd arrived in Sydney as a wealthy Scottish immigrant, and he had a clear goal. It was to build a thriving business and pastoral empire. Admirable ambitions by some standards. It turns out that Ben's daddy, Edward Boyd, was heavily involved in the British slave trade back in the 1790s and early 1800s before the British government outlawed slavery in 1807. But as it would happen, Ben's dad left quite the impression on his second son. Despite his father claiming bankruptcy in 1826 and losing all of his property and assets. So the slave trade didn't work out that great for him. He ended up going broke. Before coming to Australia, Ben became a stockbroker and a member of the London Stock Exchange. In 1832, Ben joined the London branch of the British Insurance Company with his brother Mark, and they became their father's creditors and trustees, regaining control over the family property Merton Hall in 1833. I don't know if that's the right thing to do. It doesn't seem like it's okay. Just before he set off for New South Wales, Boyd established the Royal Bank of Australia, created to offer high interest loans to squatters and wool producers in Australia, which at the time was a lucrative trade for those who could afford to set themselves up. In Australia's colonial history, squatting referred to the practice of occupying Crown land without permission, usually to graze sheep or cattle. These squatters didn't have any legal claim to the land at first, but over time, colonial governments began recognising them as the rightful owners, largely because they were the first and often only white settlers in that region. Land was taken without consent from its traditional owners, and those who occupied it were rewarded simply by being there early in the colonial process. It feels a bit problematic. The term squattocracy, which is a blend of squatter and aristocracy, was used to describe these people as a powerful social class. They weren't just landholders, they became some of the most politically and economically influential figures during that time. Benjamin and his brother Mark wanted in on that action. And really, why wouldn't you? People are just giving land away for nothing. The Royal Bank of Australia, which Ben set up before he arrived, was boasting funds of over £1 million to law investors, but the truth was it didn't really come close. Right from the start, the bank's funds seemed pretty mixed up with Boyd's own projects. It almost appeared as if it was created to be his own personal bankroll. On top of that, he had also created the Australian Wool Company. Once Boyd made his way to Australia, the bank lent a whopping £100,000 to the wool company at a 10% interest rate. And in return for that loan, the company gave the bank some debentures. Now, I had no idea what they were. Do you know what they are? No. And it's a weird word. A debenture is a type of debt instrument that's not backed by any collateral. Debentures are backed only by the creditworthiness and reputation of the issuer, which means that Benjamin Boyd, as a broker for his own bank, assessed the creditworthiness of his own company and lent himself funds that come from the bank's investors, which made Boyd the biggest customer of his own bank.
Sounds legit.
Yeah, not problematic at all. His connections and directorship of the Royal Bank of Australia set the stage for his rapid rise in the colonies. Within just 4 years, Boyd became one of the largest landholders outside of the Crown, with properties across the Riverina, Monaro and central West Victoria. Boyd also owned and operated steamships, engaging in coastal trade, and built a substantial whaling fleet centred around his private town called Boyd Town, just south of Eden, parts of which you can still go in and visit today.
I feel like it's time to use this button already.
I would like to rear up and jackknife my legs and kick you both in the fucking jaw with my foot bone.
Just him. Just want to kick him.
We haven't even got to the bad bit yet.
Boyd's influence extended to naming the Beowa National Park after him, encompassing the remnants of Boyd Town and his broader South Coast holdings.
Obnoxious dick. I'm probably going to cut that one because of my mum.
I love it.
Sorry, Mum.
There was so many times when I was writing this, I used the C word, Megan. So many times.
Think yourself lucky, Mum. Could be worse.
It could be. Large sums of money were spent on founding the port of Boyd Town in Twofold Bay, which involved the building of a jetty and a lighthouse tower. It was the original settlement in the bay founded by Boyd in 1843 to service his properties on the Monaro Plains. The tower itself was constructed as part of Boyd's ambitious plan to establish a whaling and trading station in the area. This four-sided tower displayed at the top of each of its three sides which face the water in capital letters BOYD. This imposing structure rose to a height of 23 metres. It advertised to maritime travellers that they were now entering the commercial empire of Benjamin Boyd. Like, he's not a narcissist at all, is he? What a cock. It was designed to be a lighthouse but was never completed. It still stands today and is a testament to the skill of the many convict tradespeople who worked on it. Boyd Town included a Gothic church, stores, well-built brick houses, and an Elizabethan-style hotel. At this time, Boyd had 9 whalers working from this port. But all of this infrastructure wasn't built by him. When you have busy and important big boy dreams, you need a workforce. Boyd faced challenges in finding workers for his many enterprises, especially after the end of convict transportation in New South Wales in 1840. Convict and Indigenous labour was crucial to Benjamin Boyd because it provided a cheap, controllable and readily available workforce for his remote pastoral estates and whaling operations. Many convicts brought useful skills, while others handled the hard physical labour and poor conditions, allowing Boyd to staff all aspects of his enterprises without relying on costly free settlers. This labour force enabled him to expand rapidly and pursue his ambitious ventures while avoiding higher wages and the independent attitudes that came with European workers. There was no unions back then. But I think they were kind of at the stage because a lot of the convicts had served their time and were then free settlers. So they understood the difference between working for a master and working for an employer. So I think when they're talking about independent attitudes, a lot of it's got to do with, I've been treated like shit for such a long time, and if I'm going to work for you and you're going to use my skills, then there should be a fair trade for that. It's no surprise that Boyd would be a vocal advocate for squatting interests. He appeared before the Legislative Council advocating for increased immigration or the resumption of convict transportation to address the cheap labour shortage. It came as a heavy blow to Boyd and the other squatters who had come to rely on the labour for their own profits. The anti-transportation campaign in Britain had been led by many of the anti-slavery campaigners, while in the colony it was supported by the working classes, many themselves ex-convict and newly arrived immigrants who saw convict labour as a threat to their own ability to find employment. In 1847, Boyd returned to his roots of his family's economic success and the exploitations of his father as he returned to a controversial source of labour, sending ships to Vanuatu and New Caledonia to secure workers for his pastoral stations. I'm sorry, Megan. Benjamin Boyd's blackbirding operation subjected Pacific Islanders to severe exploitation and abuse. Now, just in case our listeners don't understand what blackbirding is, because I don't think I'd heard a lot about it before I learned about Benjamin Boyd's story. Blackbirding is the practice of coercing or deceiving people into working as labourers, often far from their home under harsh and exploitive conditions. In the context of the 19th century in Australia, it specifically refers to the kidnapping or tricking of Pacific Islanders to work on plantations, pastoral stations, and in the maritime industries like whaling. Workers were often misled about wages and conditions. Many were effectively enslaved with little freedom to leave. Blackbirding is considered a form of human trafficking and was a major part of colonial labour exploitation. That's a pretty tame, I think, description of what actually happened. We're talking about people with language barriers that are living in communities that don't even really, when we go back to you talking about kindness and people surviving in communities, a lot of those communities didn't understand economics. You know, there was still trading and bartering systems in place, and these people turned up and would kind of try to explain what they wanted, and some people would choose to go, but there were others who were just stolen. Like, there's stories of these people turning up on a beach and just taking a whole heap of young men and putting them on this ship and their families never knowing what actually happened to them. It's pretty shit.
It's very shit.
It's really shit. And this is what happened to the people at Atar as well. They just come and took this civilization of people away to...
Very contradictive in my kindness episode.
But I think it's good to show the contradiction.
Of course.
It also shows...
There's a lot of awful people out there.
Why you struggle with it, you know.
And how did it happen? Like, on such a massive level. How did the world let that happen?
Because there's just a couple of people who don't care about kindness. They care about greed, and unfortunately, they're the people who end up in charge of the rest of us.
It's not even kindness. It's just leave them the fuck alone.
Exactly.
Sorry, Mum.
But it's true. Like, at what point does your interest become more important than the well-being of others? Like, what kind of person do you have to be? How do those type of people go to sleep at night?
And how do we sit here in our privileged podcasting studio and say this when it's still happening in the world today? What can we do? How do we, as the majority of people in the world who are kind, what can we do to change this?
And it's happening before our very eyes. I know that neither of us watch the news, and there's a reason, because we can't cope. Like, I'm too sensitive for this world. It's why I have to take off into the forest, because it's the only place where the world makes sense to me. But like, currently there's people in DC being taken off the streets for no other reason than that they're homeless and being put in prison. That's happening this week in the US. There's ICE agents kidnapping people off the streets all through America, students in university, people who are coming out of their court case because they're trying to live in that country in the way that the law says. So they're going to court, they're doing the things, they've got the papers, and there's ICE agents standing outside of that court taking those people and detaining them and putting them in detention centres in one of the most privileged countries in this world. Like, sometimes I think I wish I could just turn it off and not watch. But I care about this stuff. I care that there's kids in Gaza this week who can't eat. There's parents who can't get their kids medical assistance and they're held up in bombed buildings, not knowing when the next time is that there'll be a food drop or even whether they'll be lucky enough to get some of that food. Oh, God, don't even get me started. I'm not sure if you know about this rally that's happening in Australia on the 31st of August. It's a Australia First rally, and it's just a xenophobic, racist, disgusting thing that's talking about immigration, and they're staging it as a peaceful protest. But it's so people can take to the streets and talk about racism in a open forum. And these are the same people in our country who are ducking down to the Chinese shop to buy Chinese takeaway. They're the people who are buying clothes off Temu. It's okay to utilise those resources, but I don't want you to live next door to me. It's fucked. It's so fucked. Sorry, Deebs. I think this is the reality. Like, I think this is why I can't look away, and I think it's why these stories like Benjamin Boyd and Peter Warner and what happened to those guys, when we can see it from a historical perspective, we can then identify when those same things are happening again in our world now. We can see the consequences of what happens to these Pacific Islander people and the devastation that they're left with our Indigenous communities and the devastation that they're left with. And if we repeat these same things, it might look a little bit different now, but it's the same process that these people have already been through, and we're going to put them through it again. And it just has to stop.
How?
Kindness. People need to start thinking about the people next door to them, not as a race or a sex or a gender, or they're just humans.
Education?
Maybe. Turn the fucking news off and stop listening to the political spin that's put behind these stories. Or if you're going to watch the news, do your own research. Don't just take it as gospel because some bloke in a suit told you to think that. Like under this thing with what's going on in DC, they're saying, oh, we're going to put 14-year-old gangsters in prison. But at the same time as that's happening, they're wanting to lower the age of marriage to 14. We have seen what happens when old men have access to young children. Let's not make that legal. I mean, I know this is specific to this one thing, but it's all relative. Anyway, there's our TED Talk for today. So not everybody accepted it, which is good. There's good parts in this. There's kind people in this story. His methods were considered coercive and often involved extreme violence, which caused a massive rift in public opinion here in Australia. While some supported Boyd's approach, many, including city workers, former convicts, religious leaders and anti-slavery activists, forcefully opposed him. In response to Boyd's operations in New South Wales, the Legislative Council amended the Masters and Servants Act 1847, introducing fines and imprisonment for workers who broke contracts. The amendments excluded individuals from the South Sea Islands, which rendered Boyd's contracts void. With no control over his workers, Boyd abandoned the scheme, leaving them to find their own way home. By 1848, Boyd's businesses collapsed and he left for the Californian goldfields, later meeting a brutal, but some, including me, might call it a very fitting end in 1851. So there was kind people here. They were doing the right thing. They're saying, you suck, you're a dick. We're going to use the law to stop you from doing this. It didn't stop what come later. There was a whole blackbirding population in Queensland in the years that followed. In October 1851, Benjamin Boyd set out on a hunting expedition to Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands, accompanied by one of his crew members. During their landing, gunshots were heard in a skirmish between Boyd's crew and the local population. Shortly afterward, Boyd mysteriously disappeared. Searchers turned up only his boat, his belt, and an expended firearm cartridge, offering grim clues to his fate. In the days that followed, Boyd's remaining crew raided villages in Wanderer Bay before sailing back to Port Macquarie in New South Wales. Rumours of Boyd's survival persisted, prompting an 1854 expedition led by Captain Lewis Truscott. This later investigation revealed that Boyd had been taken prisoner by the islands and executed in retaliation for the crew's aggressive actions. His skull had been kept in a ceremonial house, and it was purchased by Truscott and brought back to Sydney. Contemporary accounts, including one in the Sydney Morning Herald, frame Boyd's death quite appropriately, in my opinion. The melancholy fate of Mr. Boyd is to be attributed less to the murderous propensity of the islanders than to a sense of savage justice. The narrative we append will show that the crew of the Wanderer were the aggressors in this lamentable matter, that they first slew several of the natives of the island, and it was on this account, while on an errand of peace, that Mr. Boyd himself was seized, his attendants slain, and he himself tried by a tribunal of chiefs and condemned to death. It was kind of good to see the newspapers report it that way at the time too. So there were people who were up in arms about this, even though there was people who opposed it here. That opposition didn't last because there were thousands of people who were taken from the Pacific Islands and brought to Australia during the plantation era in Queensland, like thousands who were either promised a certain type of lifestyle or bought against their will and felt forced to work to make larger profits because they didn't want to pay the Australian workers. It's just yuck.
I know you want me to say something, but if the world hasn't come up with a solution for these powerful, mean people yet, I don't know what little old Megan can say that would make a difference.
The world keeps voting the bastards in. Boyd's life and death have long secured his place as a well-known colonial figure in Australian history. Several landmarks bear his name. Ben Boyd Road in Sydney's Neutral Bay, Ben Boyd Dam and Ben Boyd Reservoir in the Bega Valley, and until recently Ben Boyd National Park, now renamed Beowa National Park to reflect its Indigenous heritage. These markers celebrate his ambition and enterprise, portraying him as a pioneer and founding father of one of the most exquisite parts of this country. Yet much of the darker side of Boyd's life is conspicuously absent from public memory. His family ties to the slave trade, his coercion of South Sea Islanders, and the violent raids on Indigenous communities are barely acknowledged, including in the Ben Boyd Museum itself. I'll link some documentaries and interviews. There was a lot of opposition to this name change, and there are a lot of people that still live in the local area who view him as a hero. His own records are selective, and his brother Mark, in a memoir from the 1870s, downplayed these troubling aspects, reflecting a broader pattern in colonial history, the whitewashing of the past. Diaries, memoirs, and official records were often curated to make exploitation seem respectable, to turn conquest into heroism. Boyd's use of Pacific Islanders, though overshadowed by the later blackbirding trade in Queensland, was a clear precursor to a system of labour coercion that would bring tens of thousands of men into servitude between 1863 and 1904, a dark part of Australian history that many know little about. Walking through Beowa National Park, standing on the places he claimed, I, personally, felt the tension between the grandeur of his ambition and the harsh reality of his actions. The renaming of the park is a step towards acknowledging the full truth of history, confronting the violence and exploitation that have been too often erased, and created space to honour the voices of those who were silenced. Confronting Boyd's story honestly teaches us that history is never neutral. It is shaped by those with power and privilege who get to decide what is remembered and what is forgotten. Engaging with this truth enriches our understanding of the past, challenges us to question authority and the narrative and motivation it presents us with. And ultimately, reflecting on Boyd's legacy brings us back to a question that shapes how we see ourselves and others. Are we guided by kindness or are we guided by self-interest? Boyd's life shows the cost of selfish ambition when unchecked by ethics or empathy. Confronting these stories reminds us that true progress comes from not buying into power and greed, but from recognising the humanity and dignity of all people and making choices that prioritise kindness, even when the world rewards the opposite.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of If These Trees Could Talk. If you would like to access more about the places or information included in today's topic, please visit our website ifthesetreescouldtalk.com.au. If you would like to follow us on our adventures, check us out on Facebook or Insta. Our creative writer is Shannon Walters, and our podcast is produced at Bellevue Studio in the Hunter Valley with audio production by Megan Anderson. We love to hear your feedback, so please rate and review, and if you would like to hear more, please subscribe. We look forward to you joining us for our next adventure.